Hokely dokely. Please don't hit me with your van. This is one of my biggest nitpicks about having bought this bike. I would not have bought this motorcycle if I could go back and do it over again. I wouldn't do it because when I started to try to look for help in the community, a few dedicated individuals actually took the time to really narrow down exactly what the problems were. And the thing about that is, that's not a thing that you're going to get with every community. You're going to get, not a ton of riders will ride your type of motorcycle unless you get something that's really popular. And a Honda Goldwing is a pretty popular motorcycle, so there are a lot of very talented people that ride them. But the community is full of guys and gals, well, mostly guys, I guess, that just, they cannot fathom that you might want to fix something on a budget. It's like if you propose going for parts that are less expensive than Honda, you have like committed an atrocity. And I gotta say, the parts from Honda are expensive, and Honda doesn't even make most of them. I mean, like, going out of my way, just off the top of my head, I went looking for an idle air control valve, and the idle air control valve for, I think it was a 92 Odyssey, is basically the same thing. So if I needed to replace it, I didn't end up having to, but if I needed to replace it, I could literally buy that one for $20 and replace the one in this bike that costs $90. Not directly, there's some finagling you'd have to do, and you'd have to be smart about it, but it can be done, and it works. I did it. But stuff like that is just, it falls on deaf ears with a lot of the guys that own these, and that really bothered me, because it was like, oh, we'd rather stay ignorant than learn anything new, and I'm just not the kind of person that does that. I'm much more interested in knowing things very thoroughly. But the community was just not like that. It was just a couple of guys that really dedicated their time to try and figure something out, and that was because the ECM in these things had failed, and there's no support for that. So the ECM failure necessitated somebody with talent to actually fix it. Otherwise, everybody's going to buy $1,000 parts from Honda, because Honda's not going to go back and revamp that thing. It's a waste of their time right now. That's not even full throttle. Man, this thing is good, but it isn't perfect. I gotta say though, it's super fun. Very smooth, really nice ride. But I think I understand why there have been so many failed entries to compete with the Goldwing. I think its greatest weakness is the fact that it's difficult to work on. And I mean, like, it's the hardest bike I've ever worked on. Like, not that it's like, it's not technically really difficult. It's a Honda, so things are really straightforward. The procedures are pretty good. It's so time consuming. I mean, like, you want to do a clutch? Yeah, bro, good luck. Honda literally recommends taking the engine out for that one. So if you've been able to do it without doing that, more power to you. But you can absolutely change a clutch out on a Harley Davidson with basic hand tools and not a whole lot of time. The Royal Star, that was a direct competitor. That one was thrown in by Yamaha, and they ran it for, gosh, over 10 years. I know Kawasaki's still running the Kawasaki Vulcan Voyager. And I haven't ridden one myself, but it appears to be a pretty good competitor. It just, all of the competitors lack something, and I think that's why they failed. But Harley is probably the only one. No, you know what? Indian's got a couple of entries that seem to be pretty good. But Harley and Indian have the same problem, price. Well, Harley has another problem, maintenance. Because, Jesus, who puts a primary chain on the outside of your belt? That's just absurd. But that's why I stayed away from those, actually. I'd strongly considered a street glide. That was going to be my choice, because I like the laid-back seating position, and the air-cooled engine has a nice low center of gravity. And this thing, nice low center of gravity, but it's got reverse, it's got nice wind protection. It's just so difficult to work on, and you can't put forward controls on it. And I know that's a nitpicky complaint. The maintenance one is probably the biggest one. But nitpicky or not, I think that's the reason that all of the other competitors have been bikes with a different riding position. But yeah, the maintenance is just incredibly difficult, and it's expensive if you pay somebody else to do it because it takes so long to do. I mean, like an air filter on this thing. Guys, air filters require you to take this entire thing off, which includes this and the cover underneath. You're actually literally removing the ECM and cruise control computer before you can take out the air filter. And yeah, you're not going to convince me that that's a great engineering design. That was really, really silly. Now, I do appreciate a longitudinally mounted engine. I actually think it's kind of fun to ride a motorcycle that has one because it's a little more exciting, the right kind of exciting. Namely, you get on the throttle, it leans one way. You get off the throttle, it leans the other. Not a whole lot because your rotating mass is not huge compared to the mass of this bike. But I've ridden the ST1300 as well, and it's a little bit higher rotating mass weight ratio than this thing, so it's understandably got a little bit more of a rotational impulse, but that gyroscopic effect is also in a favorable position for flickability, which for the uninitiated is the feeling of effort of moving a bike over from left to right cornering. Guys that ride on the track will understand that. That's a term I've heard them use. And of course, a bike this size or an ST1300, really, you don't have great flickability in the first place. But it is noticeable to me that you don't have to put as much effort into pushing the bars. And I gotta say, like the Royal Star, that's a fairing on handlebars bike. So at any speed, you've got to put a lot more effort into moving the bars over to get that thing to turn. And at low speeds, this thing is a king. It's like you really don't have to put much effort into it at all. I mean, like you can see I'm getting all the way down to, a mile an hour before I'm putting my foot down. And yeah, I've got pretty good practice, but that took me a lot longer on the Royal Star to get down than it did on this bike. It was like the first day I started riding it, it was, oh, okay, I can do that, because it's just so smooth as it comes to a stop. I think the reason that the Royal Star and other bikes like it have failed so hard is actually because they just didn't update them properly. And then when Yamaha tried to introduce a new competitor in 2018, the Star Venture, which should have been called the Royal Star Venture, as a reboot, they went with a different name because they gave it an air-cooled V-twin, which I think was it was a good decision in some ways and a bad decision in others. I think for the fans of the Royal Star, it was a bad decision, and for fans of a Harley, it was like, we can already get an air-cooled V-twin somewhere else, so they just went ahead and got an Indian or a Harley because, well, that's a foreign bike, and they're big on loyalty to American manufacturing. My major complaint about the Royal Star is that it was not updated at all after, I think, 2001. It was a carbureted V4 with shim-over bucket valves all the way up until 2013 when they stopped making them. And I understand why Yamaha didn't make any updates, because they were end-of-lifing the bike. It wasn't performing in the market the way that they wanted. And then after they made their final entrant, the Star Venture, and it didn't sell because they were asking a lot more than it was perceived to be worth by the riders that were entertaining purchasing it. They instead went for one of these because Honda was able to charge a more competitive price and they get more of the things that they wanted, and the Star Venture just was too much of an amalgamation of a Harley with a Jap bike for people to want to pay $26,000 for it. The Royal Star Venture was great in some ways and challenging in others. In appearance, loved it. I thought it was really cool. It was actually quite funny the first time that I took it out to a low-speed handling get-together with some of the guys here on the island. They actually thought that it was a Harley. But the downsides were things like, shim over bucket valves. Like, come on, guys. In a bike like that, I don't want to have to do valves every 30,000 miles. They're a giant pain because it's not like valves on an inline 4. It's a V4, and it's a V4 on a cruiser. So you're pulling the heads, or not the heads, you're pulling the valve cover gaskets, or the valve covers, out from underneath the frame, and it's a giant pain. And doing that job was, it was rewarding for me to learn how to do it, but man, that was a nightmare. And then carburetors on top of that, no thank you. I would pass on having one of those things again, just because that maintenance is too much of a headache. And you can get a Harley Davidson that, if you ever have to change the belt on the back, it's terrible, but you don't ever have to adjust the valves, and you can go a long time without having to change the belt out. I did like that it was shaft drive. That was pretty cool. I dark-sided it before it got wrecked by a renter. I was renting a bike out, but that's a whole nother story. And before you go vilifying me for dark-siding a bike, there has never been a case of somebody crashing on account of a dark side tire. That's never happened. No insurance company is going to drop you because you dark-sided your bike, and it is not illegal, contrary to popular belief, in any of the 50 states. So no, haters, you're wrong. It's a perfectly safe practice, and if you're doing it, you're just taking advantage of having a tire that lasts longer. You're welcome to not do that if you want, but telling people that it's illegal or that it's wrong or unsafe is just flat out untrue. Okay, rant over.
Didn't I tell you that the weather in Hawaii isn't always nice? Maintenance is the big detractor for these guys. I think pretty much everywhere else, they just about nailed it. So what I liked about the Royal Star was that it had a different seating position. I prefer the cruiser style position and having my feet out in front of me. In fact, if I could have gotten another one, I might still not have gotten it, because frankly it was a maintenance headache as well. I mean, carbureted bikes are something I never thought I'd own again, and I now don't ever want to own them again. I know that's a hobby for a lot of guys. They like that, but I don't like that it smells like gas and that it's a lot more of a headache to keep well maintained. And the fact that it had shimmed valves was a headache because it was a V4. But one of the big contrasts between that bike and this one was actually the low speed handling. This thing is way better a performer at low speed than the Royal Star. And I can totally see if that was a complaint that people had, why they would have that complaint, because the Royal Star was it was so difficult to learn how to use effectively at low speeds. It's got a high center of gravity, especially compared to this bike or a Harley. And now after riding it, I tried some of the skill tests that Harley riders do. Now I don't have the amount of practice or haven't gone to a school like a motor officer school, but I know there are some out there that'll get you doing U-turns at full lock at low speeds inside of tight little boxes, and that's what I was aiming for. But I actually think that would be almost impossible to do with one of those, because its center of gravity is so much higher compared to the Harleys that are air-cooled, and it's got all that weight on the fairing. Somebody doesn't have a catalytic converter. It's got all that weight on the fairing, on the handlebars, so you have the disadvantage of having all that extra weight on the handlebars, and you have the high center of gravity. This bike, by comparison, is just a world of difference. The Goldwing is an incredible performer at low speeds. I was immediately impressed, and I understand why riders on Harleys tend to go down more often. Now, some people would argue, oh, it's a skill issue. I don't know, man. I'm not a believer that everybody who rides is completely competent, and I'm also not a believer that they're all idiots. So there's that guy again. Yeah, wonderful. Love that sound. Just kidding. That's probably my biggest complaint about the Harley community, actually, is everybody, oh, loud pipes save lives. Well, statistically speaking, that's not true. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. So this thing has a lot of advantages. But if I were to go and pick a bike, if I could build my own, like it was Build-A-Bear, I think the closest motorcycle on the market to what I would do is the Yamaha Star Venture from 2018 to 21. I haven't owned one yet, but that is the bike that I would like to own. Obviously on an island, the choices are very limited, so I landed on this, and it was not a bad choice. For an island bike, yeah, I know, the haters in the comments are, why would you have a Goldwing on an island? Well, you know what, man, fuck you, that's why. It's because it's so damn comfortable to ride. I like to ride a lot. I like to ride straight. I mean, in America, it's all highways like this. So it's not like you're doing a ton of cornering, and, you know, American drivers are pretty damn terrible in comparison to other parts of the world anyway. Not saying the Spanish are great. They all stop at roundabouts too, so y'all got some things to figure out. But in the rest of Europe, I was perfectly happy riding around. And I would definitely do it again. I'd much prefer riding there over being in the States. But you gotta go where you gotta go. So here I am. And I was lucky to find this bike, I think. Although it was a fixer-upper, that definitely helped me learn a ton of things about it. So I wouldn't shy away from owning another Goldwing if that was the only choice in front of me. Or if I was trying to save money, because I'm not made of money. But I think the Star Venture would be my pick, because it's a cruiser seating position. It's got all the accoutrements that the Goldwing has, and I mean all of them. It has a reverse. It's even got a creeper motor for going forward when you're parking, so its system is a little bit better. It has more cargo space in the trunk and the saddlebags than the Goldwing, if you can believe it. And it's an air-cooled V-twin that is transversely mounted. And being transversely mounted means all of the parts on it that need maintenance regularly are easily accessible, unlike on this thing. And there's no, well, there are some fairings to remove if you need to get to stuff up in the front, but it's not like the Goldwing where you got to remove the whole friggin' all of this just to get to the air filter. The air filter on the Star Venture is just a little plate on the side, and you pull the filter out like it's a Harley V-twin. So I'm a big fan of what they did with that thing. I'm very saddened that Yamaha decided to end of life it in 21, but I get it. They're a business, so they got to make business decisions, and if it wasn't selling, well, it is what it is. And the lack of support for it, now that it is an end-of-life motorcycle, that is a concern that weighs heavy in my mind if I were to find one. And I've been looking. I would like that to be my next bike. But all things told, it's really hard to go wrong with a Goldwing. Just go in knowing that if you're going to do your own work, you got a lot of stuff ahead of you. And as long as you keep up on it, you will not have problems. If you neglect it and you don't ride it, you're signing up for a whole lot of headaches. So keep that in mind. They're not meant to be sitting around. You definitely do not want to have a Goldwing sitting in your garage all the time. Oh, yeah. But they got power, baby. That's one thing this thing has over every other tourer out there. It's got more power, more torque, more horsepower, a smoother engine. Because, and I mean, even that Chinese, what is that thing called? The Suyu S2000. It's a V8, it's a Boxer 8, an opposed 8. And I think that's really cool. I'm not a loyalist that thinks, oh, it's Chinese, so it's a terrible bike. Yeah, whatever, man. They probably did a great job. And I would love to see one of those things in America. I'd love to ride one.
But it's definitely going to not be as smooth as this engine, because this one is a naturally balanced engine. And it was a really smart choice by Honda for a bike that's meant to go a very, very long way. And you know, doing bottom end maintenance on an engine like this. Matter of fact, I actually think the biggest problem with these bikes, like for ownership, is that if they have a transmission issue, that is just, you have to take the engine out of the bike, and that's a big problem. And a lot of them have had transmission issues, so that's a big detractor. But as far as the engine bottom end is concerned, like the cylinder walls and the cylinder rings and all that stuff, these things will, you know, obviously they'll run probably 300,000 miles before they need a rebuild, which I don't know that I've ever even heard of anyone having to go that far on a bike like this, although I'm sure there's some dedicated soul out there that's done it. And I mean, given enough time and enough money, I think that's probably something I would do. Yeah, you can check out my top 5 list. I'll put that link up, and let me know what your thoughts are. If you've got a competitor, or you think there's another bike that does better than the Goldwing, or if you think I'm full of it, leave a comment. Let me know. I want to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching. Thanks for joining me on this ridden ride on a Goldwing, and I appreciate you coming out, spending the time. I'm looking forward to having you with me for another ride. Ride safe. You know, Honolulu would be really nice if it was run by other people. This place's politics are just awful. One of the first things I did on this bike was actually put the flashing LEDs in the tail lights. So I like to grab the lever and repeatedly let off of it because they'll blink. And I think that's a really underrated safety feature on a bike like this. I really like having, yeah, you got a motorcycle, sure, I get it. You want the danger. But let's face it, we all want to live the life of riding. We don't want to die. And I mean, if you're the kind of person that does ride without a helmet, more power to you. But if you were my friend or in my family, absolutely not. That is non-negotiable. I will absolutely tell you every time I see you, I want to see your helmet and your gear on your body when you're riding. Super important. But yeah, I love those little like flashy light deals that people have put on the back of their helmets. And I like putting those little things in the tail lights of this because it gets people's attention. And I want them to see me and not run into the back of my bike. And also, for those of you that are in the camp of, well, lane filtering or lane splitting is wrong, go to hell. That shit is perfectly fine, and it doesn't hurt anybody. And if you're the sort of person that says, oh, well, you should wait in line like everyone else. Okay, so you're the crab that pulls the other crabs back into the bucket. No. Lane splitting, like safe lane splitting and safe lane filtering to the front of lights is an advantage to everybody. It's good for traffic, it's good for motorcyclists, and you can statistic it to death about all kinds of different aspects of where it goes better or worse, but it definitely helps with traffic flow. That is not even up for debate. And it makes a lot of us feel safer. We can just scoot up in between And you Americans that are like, oh, but more space, y'all need to go drive in a different country somewhere. I'd love to put a few Americans in Nepal. See how long they last.